Quite often, we hear the word pagan being thrown around in a modern context, especially by YouTubers in the field of genetics and archaeology, both legit and phony, not giving any names, who happen to have some massive clout. But does anyone actually accurately know what a pagan is? Well, pagan is a broad and generic term used in the West by Abrahamists, but mostly Christians, to refer to the native European tribes who did embrace Abrahamism and who were followers of Asha, who continued to follow a spiritual path that was in accordance with the natural laws and the natural order that governs our universe, our world, and our human behavior. In contrast to the Abrahamists, who follow a spiritual path that's all about overturning and changing everything that's natural through force, violence, and sheer willpower. Hinduism, or Sanatana Dharma as it's properly called in the Vedic scriptures, is essentially the paragon of paganism, the ambassador to it, really. Everything in the Vedic scriptures, content wise, from the metaphysical, from the epistemological, from the ethical, and from the scientific outlook, overlaps with everything that the pre Christian Europeans believed. Whether it was the Germanic tribes, the Slavic tribes, the Latin tribes, the Baltic tribes, or the Greeks. And in fact, the etymology of the Sanskrit word dharma is related to the Lithuanian term used to describe that path, the same path that the pagan Lithuanians used to follow, which would have been called Darna. That's not a coincidence, since we know that Lithuanian is the closest living language to Proto-Indo-European. And don't forget that the ancestors of the Balto Slavs, of the Indo-Iranics, and of the Vedic Aryans largely originate from their region of Europe, from the Baltics. During Greco-Roman times, and even earlier, during the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and even the Ice Age, all Europeans adhered to Dharma, or Asha, as it would be referred to as in the Iranian linguistic tradition, and they adhered to it as it was understood in the context of their own culture and in their own language. In the medieval era, paganism can largely be used to describe what would have still been the cultural matrix of parts of Northern Europe that turned predominantly Christian at a much later date in the historical record, mainly Scandinavia, Finland, and Lithuania. Similar to their Asiatic counterparts, they had an oral history and an oral method of transmitting their traditions and mythologies, the fundamental teachings of their faith. A great example of some pagan oral bearers of traditions in the European context would have been the Druids from the Celtic culture, who sadly no longer exist, as they were either wiped out or turned into something that they're not by the Abrahamists. And unfortunately, this causes a lot of Abrahamists to look at the parallels between their religion and Sanatana Dharma, or Asha, and say that those pagan savages stole from them, when in fact the parallels largely indicate that Jesus was well versed in the content of Vedic spirituality and in the theology of the Iranics, Rome's rival superpower, and taught both in a Jewish society that didn't understand it or like any of it and had Christ killed as a result. And this is where I end my dissertation. Thank you for watching.